Good morning, everyone. Let's do some prayers and then start our Thursday class. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhurbhuvasvaha Tatsavitravarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat Astoma Sadgamya Tamsoma Jyotirgamya Mrityorma Mritam Gamya Om Sehna Bhavatu Sehna Bhunaktu Saviryam Karvavahi Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahi Om Shanti 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 Om. We are going to start the new section today. In fact, this is a continuation of the same last section where there's a conversation is happening between Rishi Yajnavalkya and other priests over there. Okay. And we learned the process of transcending death in the form of accessories in sacrifices, time factor, etc., with the help of certain meditations. And this section further explains the nature of the death, which is a product of ignorance in our mind. To be more precise, this section explains death as attachment to the various sense organs and also their objects. Okay. Objects are called YSA. Okay. The sense organs and their objects rest us and keep us subservient to them. That means we almost become servant to these. And we become bound to this ever-recurring phenomena of birth and death. Sure, there is some pleasure, but there's a pain also. So birth and death, pleasure and pain. And the entire range of relative existence is swayed and overcome by this death. And philosophically speaking, this is nothing but attachment to the sense objects. Meditation and knowledge give us freedom from this attachment. Because knowledge, as we keep on gaining the knowledge, we understand what is true, what is not true, what is permanent, what is eternal or non-eternal. And through meditation also, we try to detach from something which is not permanent and attach our mind to something which is permanent. And this knowledge and meditation, they lead us to the final liberation. So the very conception of duality is a form of death. And until it is transcended, until the sacrifice and its accessories, meditator and the object of meditation, means and ends are conceived, and we see the interrelationships. If we don't see it, we keep on going back and forth into the cycle of birth and death. So in order to effect this transcendence, it becomes inevitable to acquire a clear knowledge of the forms of death. Because only through a knowledge like that, meditator can avoid the mal influence and has enough wisdom and as well as power to surpass this evil infected different forms of objects and the senses. So this present section deals with the nature of bondage in the form of the senses and their objects. This is what we're going to learn in this section. So this Rishi Yagyavalkya is going to instruct us on the nature of bondage, which is caused by the organs in the body and the objects outside. The attachment in the form of love and hatred caused by the mutual interaction of the organs and objects on each other. There are two terms in the very first verse, graha and atigraha, Sanskrit words, senses and the objects. They are very significant. By understanding their true nature, we really understand this problem which we are going through life after life, because they grasp each other. The senses grasp the objects and the objects grasp the senses. The Upanishad says that the objects are stronger in grasping than the senses. When we think deeply about the nature of these two, we cannot definitely say which is the stronger of the two, the objects or the senses. We may not be wrong if we say that the senses are stronger than the objects and the objects are stronger than the senses. We have to decide. The two seem to be mutually competing with each other, actually. Like who is the stronger, and they have not come to a definite conclusion. Senses are flared up by the objects. And objects in their turn become either more attractive or repulsive only when they are contacted by the senses. So they mutually energize each other. We see something, we get attracted to it or repulsed by it, and we keep on thinking about it. That's how they take power over us. And these senses and the objects, they also fight with each other, destroy each other. And in a philosophical terms, they eat each other. So this is just a little prelude to this section. And let's look at the very first verse of this section. Ath henam jartakarv art bhaga paprach yagye valke iti havach kati graha katyati graha iti ashto graha ashtavati graha iti ye te ashtahu graha ashtahavati graha katyeta iti. Then Artbhag of the line of Jarat Karyu asked him, Yagyavalkya, he asked Yagyavalkya, and what did he say? How many organs or grahas are there? And how many objects, atigrahas? There are 8 organs and 8 objects. Which are those 8 organs and 8 objects? So Artbhag comes from a line of Jarkaru. So he is the one who is questioning Yagyavalkya, that how many perceivers or organs are there and how many super perceivers or objects are there. See, atigraha, ati means super. And Yagyavalkya replied, 8 perceivers and 8 super perceivers. And Artbhag asked which are those 8 perceivers and 8 super perceivers are there. So after the Hotri priest, in the previous section, we saw that Ashval, he stopped questioning. Now the Artbhag, the son of Ritbhag, belonging to the line of Jaratkaru, he is addressing Rishi Yajnavalkya and started questioning him. So Artbhag asked about the number of grahas and the atigrahas. And by these two terms, the questioner meant organs, both the sense organs and the motor organs. So not only the senses. So Karamindriya and Gyanindriya, and their corresponding objects also. So grah is that which perceives, grah. In Hindi also, this word is often used like a grahan karna, graha. So it stands to denote an organ. Ati graha is that which is greater than the graha, and it means an object. Because object exert a great influence on the organs. Eyes are okay until they see something which attracts or repulses them. So Yajnavalkya said that there are 8 organs and 8 corresponding objects. And when asked about their details, Yajnavalkya enumerated them in the following mantra. So next, 8 mantra, very short mantra. Let's go through them literally first, and then I'll explain it further. So verse number 2, prano vigraha, so apane na atigrahen grihita, apanen hi gandha injagrati. The nose is verily an organ. It is dominated by its object, odor, because one smells odors through the air that is breathed in. So this is the first one he's talking about. Then the second one, Vagvegraha. Sa namnaha atigrahen grihita vachahi naman yabhivadati. The organ of speech is verily an organ. It is dominated by its object, because one pronounces names through the organ of speech. Third one, Jivaha Vegraha, Sa Rasen Atigrahen Grihita, Jivyahi Rasan Vijanatihi. The tongue is verily an organ. It is dominated by its object, taste, because one perceives tastes through the tongue. The next one, Chakshu Vergraha, Sa Rupen Atigrahen Grihita, Chakshu Sahi Rupani Pashyati. The eye is verily an organ. It is dominated by its object, color, because one sees colors through the eyes. Next one, Shrotram Vegraha, Sa Shabden Atigrahen Grihita, Shrotren hi Shabdahan Shrinotihi. The ear is verily an organ. It is dominated by its object, sound, because one hears sounds through the ear. Manovegraha, sa kamen atigrahen grihita, manasahi kaman kamyate. The mind is verily an organ. It is dominated by its object, a covetable thing, because one desires covetable things through the mind. Hasto vegraha sakarmanati grahen grihita hastabhyam hi karam karoti. The hands are verily an organ. They are dominated by their object, work, because one does work through the hands. त्वक्वेग्रह सस्पर्शेन अतिग्राहेण गृहीता त्वचा हि स्पर्शन अद्यते इति एतेः अष्टौ ग्रह अष्टाव अतिग्रह. The skin is verily an organ. It is dominated by its object, touch, because one perceives touches through the skin. These are the 8 organs and 8 objects. So we see that we are all familiar with these. But over here, beautifully, Yajnavalkya is enumerating the organs designated through the term graha as nose, the organ of smell, speech, the organ of articulation and sound in general, tongue, the organ of taste, eye, the organ of perception, ear, the organ of audition, mind, the organ of deliberation, hands, the organ of action, and skin, the organ of touch. And he also enumerates their respective objects. It is a fact we are all familiar with that nose can smell nothing in the absence of odor. Speech can say nothing in the absence of sound. And the same way, the rest of the organs also cannot do their respective functions if the corresponding objects are not presented to them. Eyes are able to perceive just because they are presented with a form and with the necessary stimuli to apprehend it, which really arises from the object of perception. If ear is supplied with sound, it begins functioning. It is due to those objects that the organs, which are themselves unblemished, untainted, experience with good as well as bad. So we can smell a beautiful fragrance. At the same time, we can smell a foul odor also through our nose. We can hear the sound of the mantras through our ears. At the same time, we can hear foul language also. So good as well as bad. The organ of speech speaks pleasant, it can speak unpleasant words. And the same thing goes with the other organs also. So from this, we come to the conclusion that attachment is due to the objects which present themselves to their respective organs. And that's why they gave the name Atigraha. And in order to transcend attachment, which is designated as a death, one has to control the objects, which is referred to as Atigraha, which control or cause activity in the senses. And it's also to indicate that it is the objects that should be tackled first. Because something grosser we can tackle with better. A block of ice can be removed from one place to other. But the vapors, when it becomes so subtle, cannot. So they should first be merged at the respective senses. So then, in order to transcend death, the sadhak, the aspirant, should first deliver the senses from their objects. And then withdraw the senses into the mind through meditation. That's why when we meditate, what do? We choose a peaceful place, comfortable seat. We sit down. Then we close all our senses, all the apertures. We draw our attention inward. So Rishi Yagyavalkya, he said these are the 8 organs and their corresponding objects which cause a kind of agitation in the organs which result in the attachment and hatred. Rag and dvesh. Attachment and aversion. Though usually the organs are said to be 11. We have heard about that in Bhagavad Gita and in the other scriptures also. 5 sense organs, 5 motor organs, and the internal organ, the mind. Ekadash. But over here, this Rishi is mentioning only 8. Perhaps this Rishi might be of the view that the remaining 3 are not specifically mentioned by him. The genitals, the anus, and the feet. These are the 3 which are missing, with their objects of pleasure, excretion, and movement, respectively. Actually, they come under the 2 organs. If you think about it, skin and the hands, along with their objects of touch and work included among the 8. Okay. So that's why he did not mention these separately. The genitals and the sex pleasure could be considered as connected with the skin and touch, which pervade the whole body. The same way, the anus and the feet, with their objects of excretion and movement, can come under the hands and work. Since all the 3 organs are connected by the same nadis, the nerve channels. So that's why maybe he did not mention it. So now let's look at the next verse, and that is a verse number 10. Yagye valkehe iti hovach yad idam sarvam mrityor annam kasvitsaha devta yasyaha mrityu annamiti agnim ve mrityu so apam annam ap punar mrityu jayati. Yagyavalkya said, Artbhag, since all this is the food of death, who may that deity be whose food is death? Fire verily is death, but it is the food of water. One who knows thus overcomes further death. So, in other words, all this manifested universe is overcome and swayed by death. See, manifestation ultimately turns into unmanifestation, and that is death for it. As we eat the food, death swallows everything here in this universe. So the question raised by Artbhag is whether there is another entity who swallows this death. See, death swallows the world. Is there another entity which swallows the death? And if so, what is that entity? So, eater of death. So, he must be the depth of even death. We learned that in Katha Upanishad, if you remember. Over there, the Lord of Death said that Supreme God is he whose source is death. If you remember that. If a particular God is indicated to be the death of death, then it will be a particular God. Ultimately, that God swallows everything, even the death. And if for this reason the answer is given in the negative, then there's no death for death. If you say that no, there is no death to the death, then the liberation or the release from sansar would become an impossibility. And we know liberation, which is immortality, is possible only by the destruction of death or mortality. We got to keep these points in view. These rishis, they are talking in a very deep language over here. So he put this tricky question, which cannot be answered in the usual logical manner. The answers to these questions come from scriptures alone. So the wise sage Yagyavalkya answered the question through the analogy of a fire, which is the destroyer of all. Fire destroys everything, but it itself is destroyed by water. So the fire, which itself is death, is destroyed by water, which may therefore be said to be the death of death. See the logic over here? The same way the organs which experience different perceptions and the organs which cause attachment, which is designated by the term death, are swallowed together with their objects when the realization of the self dawns. You can say that by meditation on various materials and accessories of the sacrificial rites, a person overcomes natural attachment. A person is released from the fetters in the form of desires, because the desires are the one which bind us to actions, rites, and even the results. He who knows this death of death, who knows the self by the realization of which the fetters of desires and attachments can be got rid of, put an end to the possibility of further bondage or death, which is called liberation. So this mantra furnishes us with the idea that until death in the form of desire and attachment is eliminated, there can be no chance of a release from bondage. And that's exactly what Shri Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita. When he said there are 3 gateways to hell, what was the first one? Kam, desires. From the desires become attachments. Death of death is no other than the process of extinction and annihilation of desires and attachment caused by ignorance. Just as the fire, see, he gave the example of the fire and water. Just as the fire, the consumer of everything, is itself consumed by water, even so the sense attachment to objects, which is a death to the soul, is annihilated when the individual consciousness crosses the limits of this phenomenal realm and shifts its center from the sensual pleasure to the spirituality. So when we cultivate these desires, from the worldly desires, we cultivate the godly desires. We are consuming or getting rid of those worldly desires. So just like water can eat up the fire. So by knowing this, and also by realizing the truth about meditation, or through meditation, the sadhak averts death and becomes liberated. So I hope you can see this message given by this great rishi so clearly. So in nutshell, we are supposed to know where we live, what the senses are, and the objects related or attached to the senses, and how to withdraw within, and instead of the secular desires, convert them into sacred desires. Through knowledge and through meditation. Let's look at next verse, verse number 11. याज्ञवल्क्यः इति होवाच यत्रायं पुरुषो म्रियत उदासां प्राणः क्रामन्त्यो नेतिः नेतिः होवाच याज्ञवल्क्यः अत्र एव संवनीयन्ते स उच्चृति अध्यायातिः अध्यायतो मृता शेतेः. Yajnavalkya said, when this liberated man dies, do his organs depart from him or not? So this is the other rishi he's saying. He's asking this question to Yajnavalkya. No, said Yajnavalkya, they dissolve in him alone. Only the body swells, is bloated, and lies motionless in that condition. So do the senses and their objects in the form of impressions in the mind undergo disintegrations at the time of death of a man who has attained liberation? So he's not talking about an average person's death. He's talking about a death of the body of this liberated person. In other words, does the subtle body also leave him when the physical body perishes? So when the liberated person dies, some say that the sense organs get disintegrated into their constituents, the subtle elements, without any further possibility of taking the embodiment. So according to this view, the gross, subtle, and causal bodies, it's like a Suthul Sharir, Suksham Sharir, and Karan Sharir of the individual come to a dead stop. It doesn't want any further materials in the form of residual karmas, which can determine reincarnation or re-embodiment. So the elements which make up his entire physical and psychological personality become powerless. See, ordinary person when dies, sure, physical body becomes inert. But the psychological, the subtle body does not. But over here, the question is being asked about the liberated person. So they become powerless. If they are powerless, they are actionless. And they get dissolved into the universal counterparts. That means they go back to those devatas. Those 5 devatas, they just go back to them. The skin goes back to the earth. The hair to urban trees, the semen to water, etc. So they all go back where they came from originally. So in the same way, the dissolution of a physical personality takes place. The mind goes back to the moon. The ears go back to the quarters. The eyes to the sun, etc. There are beautiful Vedic mantras these rishis have written for that Antim Sanskar, Antyeshti, where we pray to all these elemental forces to go back where they came from. So the personality of the individual is freed from all causes of reincarnation. Coming and going is only when we are not freed from it. But liberated person is freed from it. So the view of sage Yajnavalkya, given in reply to the question, is so beautiful, so clear. He does admit the disintegration of the psychological personality, but in his view, after the death of a man who is liberated, the senses also their objects in the form of impressions get dissolved and united in the self itself. They just go back. Why the self? Because what is there? In reality, there is only the self, only the Brahma. It just goes back to that. It is like the light and heat of a lamp getting united with the cosmic fire principle. When the lamp is extinguished, or like the rays of the sun entering into the sun when it sets. Doesn't it seem like that? Where did all that light go? It goes back to the sun, it seems like. So the personality of the individual, consisting of senses and their objects, becomes one with the Supreme Self, merges in the Atma only, just like the waves merge into the ocean only. Waves could be very fierce, but they just go back into the ocean. So what remains is the physical gross body which undergoes the so-called process of death. It swells up, gets inflated, and it lies motionless. The self, unfettered, goes nowhere, ascends nowhere, travels nowhere. He's talking about the liberated person. Where will it go? It's everywhere. Doesn't have to go. Having become free from all limitations, it shines as the Supreme Self. What go to the earth, water, sun, moon, etc., are the gross elemental parts which form the limiting adjuncts of the physical body, which cause the embodiment of the soul, the fetters, as we call them, or the upadhis. The idea is that the liberated soul, after the destruction of the bondage caused by the limiting adjuncts, the upadhis, does not go anywhere in space. So clearly, these rishis are telling us that, answering this question which comes to our mind. Because a personality which is not liberated will go somewhere with the help of the mind. Mind will take that soul, that jivatma somewhere. Now the mind has been transcended. There's no mind. Where will it go? It just merges into everything. And that is what's called Brahmalin or liberation. And that is the goal for all of us. Sooner or later, that's what we have to be. So, does not go anywhere explains the correct meaning of transcendence. Does not go anywhere. That's why we use those words for God also. God doesn't go anywhere. Where can it go? It's everywhere. Because a person can go somewhere where that person is not. God is everywhere. So that's why God is called motionless. Where can it move to? It's everywhere. And this is what happens to this transcendental person. So it removes the commonly misunderstood notion of ascent or movement from one lower plane to another higher one. So we keep on rising up and up, but ultimately, this is the highest, where we don't go anywhere. So according to Yajnavalkya, this is the freedom. Freedom from the fetters of bondage. And never a departure from a particular center to another. Coming and going, ended. And how did this happen? With the sadhana. Knowledge as well as meditation. And you might say, how about bhakti? Without bhakti, we cannot have the knowledge. Without bhakti, we cannot even meditate. Bhakti is the real ras for all of it. Without bhakti, we cannot even do the karam yoga, the seva. Bhakti is everywhere. So he is teaching us how to withdraw our attention from the senses and the sense objects and take it towards that center, the godly center. So next week we'll start with the verse number 12 and finish up this section also. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much for joining.